Hey everyone, I'm Harry. Today, we're diving into a tragic story. Back in 2012, at the London Summer Olympics, Puerto Rican boxer Felix Verdejo Sanchez was a rising star. He was considered a diamond, one of the most promising athletes in his country, expected to win titles and gold medals. Everyone believed this talented and driven young man would reach incredible heights in the sports world. However, in 2021, Felix's name hit the headlines again, but this time in the crime section. This is a story about a teenage crush that turned into an obsession, leading to a horrifying tragedy. The same boxer who delivered the knockout of the year in 2014 and was highly praised by two-time Olympic champion Vasyl Lomachenko almost faced a death sentence but ended up with a life sentence instead. Despite undeniable evidence and confessions from his accomplice, Felix still refuses to admit guilt. Felix Verdejo was born on May 19, 1993, in San Juan, Puerto Rico. He grew up in a modest, large family and had a passion for sports from a young age. Initially, he dreamed of a career in baseball. However, fate had other plans. When he was 9, a family friend visited with his son, who was the same age. The boys started playing in the yard, but ended up in a fight. Their parents separated them, and the father of the future star remarked that if Felix wanted to fight, he should do it with boxing gloves. After that fight, Felix asked to be taken to a local gym. From his first training session, he fell in love with boxing. At 16, he won the Pan American Junior Championships. A year later, he clinched his country's championship and then competed in the London Olympics, reaching the quarterfinals. That same year, his professional career took off. Felix had 29 fights, securing 27 victories, and in 2014, he delivered the best knockout of the year against Sergio Villanueva. In 2015, Felix won his first championship belt with the WBO Latino title, which he successfully defended 6 more times over the next 2 years. Everyone who saw him fight believed he was destined to make history in world boxing. Now, let's meet Keisha Rodriguez. She was born in November 1993 in San Juan. Her full name is Keisha Marlene Rodriguez Ortiz. Her parents, Jose and Kayla Rodriguez, had another daughter, Nicole, and also raised Kayla's son, Jonathan, from a previous marriage. Keisha was an outgoing and sociable girl who did well in school, loved animals, and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Her best friend was her sister Barisa, with whom she shared all her secrets and worries. Keisha attended the same school as Felix Verdejo, who was the same age. They had known each other since childhood, and during their teenage years, a romantic relationship blossomed between them. In 2011, Rodriguez's parents divorced, and Kayla moved to relatives in Florida. Her daughters, who were already adults by then, decided to stay in San Juan. Despite each of the sisters living their own lives, they continued to stay in close contact and shared everything that was happening to them. At the age of 18, a promising boxer who had already participated in the Olympic Games had an affair with a young schoolgirl and aspiring model, Elisa Maria Santiago Sierra. At that time, Elisa was only 14 years old and still in school, but even then, she made big plans for the future with the promising and world-famous athlete. In addition, Elisa's parents were not at all against this relationship. Felix, who was attractive and talented and always had many admirers, became a boxing star who literally basked in the rays of fame and was surrounded by female attention. He did not miss the opportunity to have a fling or an affair on the side, despite having a serious relationship with Elisa. He continued to meet with his school friend Keisha. Keisha's sister Barisa and her mother, Kayla Rodriguez, knew about the affair and did not approve of the relationship. In addition, the situation was very ambiguous. On the one hand, Elisa considered herself the only woman and great love of the athlete, was preparing for the wedding and made far-reaching plans for their joint future. On the other hand, Keisha knew that her lover had a fiancé, but deep down, the naive girl herself still hoped to be the one. In 2016, Felix married Elisa, who was nearly 19 at the time. By then, Elisa had become a fairly famous model with tens of thousands of social media followers and had opened her own beauty studio specializing in eyelash extensions. In August of the same year, just a few months after their wedding, Felix was involved in a serious motorcycle accident. He was taken to the hospital with head injuries, bruises, and lacerations. His trainer, Ricky Marquez, feared that this incident might derail his promising career. However, Felix defied the odds, made a rapid recovery, and soon returned to the ring. In September 2019, Felix shared a photo on social media with Keisha, who was in the late stages of pregnancy. He captioned it, "Soon I will meet my daddy's princess." A month later, he announced the birth of his daughter, Miranda Verdejo Santiago. Publicly, Felix appeared to be a loving husband, caring father, and exemplary family man. However, he continued to see Keisha behind his wife's back. Elisa later admitted she suspected her husband of infidelity, but each time, Felix tearfully promised to end the affair. Keisha repeatedly tried to end the relationship, but Felix wouldn't let her go. He threatened her, saying that if she found someone else, it would not be good for her or her new partner. Despite everything, Keisha, who had loved Felix since high school, continued to have feelings for him. Rodriguez pursued her passion for animals and got a job at a veterinary medicine and aesthetics center. Her colleagues described her as conscientious, hardworking, and very responsible. She lived with 2 dogs and a cat, whom she adored. In 2020, Elisa discovered her husband's correspondence with several women, including Keisha. Furious, she threw Felix out of the house, threatening to file for divorce and prevent him from seeing their daughter. These threats impacted Felix significantly, especially since his career was in a slump at the time and he didn't need additional problems. For a while, he stopped seeing Keisha but continued to control her movements. After a few months of secret visits, their relationship resumed, and in April 2021, Keisha found out she was pregnant. She took a rapid test from the drugstore, which confirmed her suspicions. She first called her sister, who knew about her complicated relationship with Felix, and told her everything. Keisha, already 27, was ready to have the child and decided against an abortion. She hoped Felix would accept the news positively. However, Felix was far from pleased. He angrily told her to go to the doctor and insisted that if the pregnancy was confirmed, she should have an abortion. Keisha firmly refused, but the boxer began to threaten her and insist. Felix said that an illegitimate child would finally destroy his reputation, and this he could not allow. After Keisha's visit to the hospital, her pregnancy was confirmed and she now had a certificate to prove it. She called Felix and told him everything, which made him furious. Felix shouted and demanded that Keisha immediately get rid of the child, but she again responded with a categorical refusal. Then the athlete decided to go on the sly, saying that he did not believe her and wanted to personally look at the issued medical certificate. He appointed Keisha a meeting in the evening in a crowded place, which did not surprise her because they always tried not to draw attention to themselves and did not stand out in front of anyone. A few days before the meeting, the boxer stopped by his old friend, Luis Antonio Cadiz, who worked in a local machine shop and also had ties with the criminal world, selling illegal drugs. Felix briefly outlined the situation and asked him to help him get rid of his pregnant mistress. Luis had previously been in the field of vision of the police, and the prospect of being in prison scared him. But the athlete was persistent, assured that everything would go smoothly and the police would never come after them. Besides, Felix promised him an impressive cash reward, and Luis agreed. With the support of an accomplice, Felix called Keisha and told her that he wanted to meet her on the evening of April 29th to confirm her pregnancy and decide what to do next. Immediately after talking to her lover, Keisha called her sister back and told her everything. She still hoped that Felix would accept her child and would not insist on an abortion, but Baris found the situation quite alarming. She knew that the boyfriend had threatened her sister and was worried that he might do something to her. Baris called her mother and shared her concerns, but even together, they could not dissuade Keisha from that fateful meeting. At the appointed time, Rodriguez, taking a doctor's note, arrived at the meeting in her own Kia Forte automobile. Verdejo drove there in his pickup truck, in the back of which Luis was hiding. Keisha immediately got into the athlete's car and showed him the results of the tests. He once again talked about terminating the pregnancy, but Keisha, crying, again responded with a refusal. Against this background, the couple began to quarrel violently, turning to shouting. Then, Felix suddenly hit Keisha in the head with his fist, causing her to immediately lose consciousness. While Keisha was unconscious, Felix took a syringe with a large dose of illegal substances hidden in the glove compartment of the car, which Luis had obtained at his request, and injected Keisha. Then, together with his accomplice, they carried her to the back of the car where there were already prepared pieces of wire and a concrete block. The men tied Rodriguez up, attached the load, and then covered her with a tarp so that no one would accidentally see anything. Felix then returned to the pickup truck while his accomplice got behind the wheel of Keisha's vehicle. Together, they drove to the bridge over the San Jose Lagoon. It was virtually deserted at night, and the men, making sure no one could see them, threw Keisha, still alive, into the water. Afterward, however, they decided to fire a few test shots in pursuit, using the firearms they had brought with them, so as not to leave the victim any chance. Having finished the massacre, each of the perpetrators went home. Keisha's co-workers were the first to worry when she didn't show up at the Veterinary Medicine and Aesthetics Center the next day. Keisha had always been very responsible and couldn't just not show up for work without notifying anyone. Since she didn't answer the phone, it was decided to contact her sister to find out what happened. After several unsuccessful attempts to contact her sister, she went to her house. No one answered the door, but Barres had a spare key, so she got in without difficulty. However, she was met only by hungry animals who had not eaten anything for almost 24 hours. Now, Barres was already in a panic because she realized that something terrible or irreparable had happened to Keisha. She immediately called her mother and told her everything, then reported her suspicions and the threats to her sister to the police. She also called Felix, but he claimed that he had spent the previous evening and night at home with his family and had not gone to any meeting. The missing girl's mother took the first flight from Florida to San Juan. She thought that her lover might have taken her daughter to a private clinic and paid for her to have an abortion without her consent. Keisha didn't even want to think about the fact that Keisha was no longer alive. The first thing to do was to question the missing girl's neighbors and co-workers, but they didn't notice anything suspicious and couldn't provide the investigation with any useful information. In parallel, messages about the disappearance of Rodriguez were posted on popular social networks, with requests for those who knew anything about her fate or current whereabouts to respond. The case quickly received wide publicity, and when it became known that the missing girl was in a long-term relationship with a famous athlete and was expecting a child from him, reporters literally lined up to interview any of Rodriguez's family members. The relatives did not hold anything back and spoke out about their suspicions, among other things blaming Felix for the incident. On April 30th, Keisha's car was found abandoned on the east side of the city with her documents and personal belongings inside. No signs of struggle were found in the interior, giving a faint hope of finding its owner alive. On May 1st, a passerby strolling on the bridge over the lagoon saw a strange shape resembling a human body in the shallow water. He reported his discovery to the police, who soon recovered from the water the body of a young woman, presumably the same one the whole city had been looking for several days. Members of the Rodriguez family, who arrived to identify the body, hoped to the last that it was not Keisha, but their hopes were not realized. The body had been in the water for several days and changed a lot, but the girl was immediately identified by a remarkable tattoo on her arm. When news of the gruesome discovery hit the press, the residents of the city revolted and began to go out to spontaneous rallies, demanding punishment for those responsible. The same day, Verdejo was detained and taken to the police station for questioning, but the athlete categorically denied his involvement and claimed that on the night of Keisha's disappearance, he was at home with his family. As there was nothing to charge him with, Felix was released on his own recognizance. One of the key witnesses was the athlete's legal wife, who, at the first interrogation, admitted that she was aware of his affair with Keisha, but that she had heard about her rival's pregnancy for the first time. On top of that, she did not confirm her husband's alibi, saying that he was not at home on the night of the murder. The first thing investigators did was check traffic surveillance footage on the way to the bridge from which Keisha was thrown. That's how they found Felix's pickup truck and the victim's car travelling behind each other, but the Kia Forte was clearly not driven by its owner. On the same day, the boxer's car was seized for examination, and in its body they found some hair of the deceased. Luis was the first to surrender to the police, promising to tell the whole truth in exchange for a reduced sentence. Felix was also taken into custody, but he refused to cooperate with the investigation, did not answer questions, and continued to deny his guilt despite the presence of irrefutable evidence. A firearm was seized from Felix, which he used to shoot the victim from the bridge and for which he had an official permit. Also, a cell phone check confirmed the fact that Felix, Luis, and Keisha were in the same location on that fateful night. Keisha's final farewell was on May 8th, and the funeral ceremony was all over the national news. It was a kind of action calling for the perpetrators of the tragedy to be punished to the full extent of the law, as well as an action to draw public attention to the problem of gender violence. The coffin with Rodriguez's body was brought to the cemetery not in a traditional hearse, but in a white carriage over which white flower petals were thrown from the air. Many famous Puerto Rican names, including show business stars, athletes, politicians, and public figures, have spoken out about the high-profile incident. Verdejo was charged with carjacking, kidnapping, premeditated murder, and the murder of an unborn child. All of these crimes together carried the death penalty, but the relatives of the deceased, from the very beginning, asked the court to elect a sentence of life imprisonment for the killer so that he would suffer in captivity for the rest of his life. The hearing was repeatedly postponed due to the worldwide coronavirus pandemic, but in the spring of 2021, the trial was held in virtual mode. The court found that the crime was committed with particular cruelty against a pregnant woman and involved multiple individuals acting in conspiracy. The details of that night were mainly reconstructed thanks to the testimony of Luis, who admitted his guilt. He confessed that he obtained the drug for injection and provided the wire and concrete block used to dispose of the body, all at Felix's request. Despite Felix's continued claims of innocence, his denials didn't influence the case's outcome. Meanwhile, Felix's wife, who testified in court, filed for divorce shortly after his arrest. She focused on developing her business and raising their young daughter. Reports suggest that Elisa Santiago has since remarried. In an interview, Elisa revealed she received anonymous calls and messages with death threats, including threats against her and Miranda. While some suspected her of orchestrating the crime, no evidence supported these claims. In the summer of 2023, the jury, after reviewing all the evidence and witness testimonies, was ready to deliver the final verdict. Felix Verdejo and his accomplice, Luis Cadiz, were found guilty on all charges. However, sentencing had not yet occurred, with the next court hearing scheduled for mid-November 2023. But on November 3rd, both men faced a maximum sentence of life in prison for the 4 felonies they were originally charged with. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'm Harry. Subscribe to the channel for more riveting stories ahead.